Welcome to Relaxing Subjects. Tonight, we are going to slow down together. There is no hurry here, nothing to solve, nowhere else you need to be. You can let your shoulders drop. You can let the day, with all its small weights and unfinished things, begin to loosen its grip. Wherever you are right now, in your bed, on your couch, in the dark, or in the low glow of a single lamp, you are exactly where you need to be. And for the next while, all you have to do is listen. Tonight, we are going to spend some time with one of the oldest and gentlest books in the world. It is called the Dhammapada. If that name is new to you, that is perfectly all right. You do not need to know anything about Buddhism to listen. You do not need to believe anything or remember anything, or take anything away with you in the morning. These are simply some very old words about the mind. Your mind, the one that has been with you all day and may still be turning quietly even now. And we are going to walk through them slowly, the way you might walk through a quiet garden at night, pausing wherever something is worth pausing for. If you feel like it, before we begin, you might leave a small word in the comments. Tell us what time it is where you are and where in the world you happen to be listening from tonight. It is a quiet pleasure to imagine all the different windows in all the different cities and small towns and countrysides where someone is lying down to rest at this very moment, listening to the same old words. You are not alone in the dark. There are others out there settling in just as you are. So let us begin the way we always should. Take a slow, deep breath. In through the nose gently and then let it out slowly, with no effort at all. Feel the weight of your body where it meets the bed or the chair. Feel how the surface beneath you is holding you up so that you do not have to hold yourself. There is nothing for you to carry right now. You can set it all down. Take one more breath, just as slow, and let your eyes close if they have not already. Let yourself settle in. Thank you for joining us here at Relaxing Subjects. Let us begin. Now, before we open the book itself, let us start with something you already know. You already know what it is to lie down at the end of a long day, tired all the way through, ready for sleep, and to find that your mind has other plans. The body is still, but the mind is not. It goes back over a conversation from this morning and rewrites your half of it. It reaches forward into tomorrow and rehearses things that have not happened and may never happen. It picks up an old worry, turns it over, sets it down, and picks it up again a moment later, as though it had forgotten it had already looked. You lie there in the quiet, and the quiet only seems to make the noise inside louder. Perhaps you have wondered on nights like that whether something is wrong with you, whether other people's minds go gentle when the lamp goes off, while yours keeps churning. I want to tell you very softly that there is nothing wrong with you. The restless mind that comes to you at night is not a broken mind. It is not a personal flaw, and it is not yours alone. It is one of the oldest human experiences there is, and the proof of that is the very book we are opening tonight, because some 2,500 years ago, on the other side of the world, in the plains of northern India, people were already speaking about exactly this: the mind that will not be still. The mind that is hard to guard, that goes wherever it wishes, that is so very difficult to hold. 2,500 years. Think of that for a moment gently, the way you might hold a smooth stone in your palm. The faces have changed, the cities have changed, the languages have changed, but the mind at night has not. The same restlessness you feel was felt by people who never saw a clock, never saw electric light, never imagined the world you live in. And someone long ago gathered up words meant to meet that restlessness with kindness rather than with fear. Those words became the Dhammapada, And, tonight, they are for you. So let us hear the very first of them. The Dhammapada opens not with a rule, not with a command, but with a quiet observation about how things actually are. And it is, in fact, one of the most quoted lines in all of Buddhism. The opening verse, which scholars number simply as verse 1, says this, in the faithful rendering by the translator Acharya Buddharakkhita: mind precedes all mental states.
Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox.
Let us sit with that for a moment, because it is the seed from which the whole book grows. Mind precedes all things. The mind comes first. Before the word you speak, there is the thought behind it. Before the thing you do, there is the small movement of mind that gives rise to it. The book is saying right at its threshold that your inner state is not a result of your life. In some quiet and important way, it is the source of it. What you carry inside you shapes what comes out of you, and what comes out of you shapes the world that comes back to meet you. And then comes that lovely, plain, country image. Suffering follows the troubled mind like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. Picture it slowly. An ox in the warm dust of an old road, pulling a cart behind it. With every step the ox takes, the heavy wheel turns and follows right there in the track of its hoof. The ox cannot outrun the wheel. The wheel is simply bound to follow step after step, because it is yoked to the cart, and the cart to the ox. So it is, the verse says, when the mind is clouded and unkind. The trouble follows along behind, faithfully, in the track of every step. Not as a punishment sent from somewhere else, but simply as the natural consequence, the cart that follows the ox. But the Dhammapada does not leave us with only the heavy image. The very first verse comes with a twin. This is why the opening chapter is called Yamakavagga, which means the pairs, or sometimes the twin verses, because its lines come 2 by 2 in contrasting couplets. One shows you the shadowed path, and then its twin shows you the bright one. So verse 2 mirrors verse 1 almost word for word, but turns it toward the light. Mind precedes all mental states.
Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never-departing shadow. Hear the change in the picture. The clouded mind is followed by the heavy turning wheel. The clear, kind mind is followed by something altogether gentler. His never-departing shadow. Picture that too slowly.
A person walking in the late afternoon sun, and beside them, faithful and quiet, their own shadow, going wherever they go, never lagging, never lost. Happiness, the verse says, is like that. Not something you chase and seize, not something you bargain for, but something that simply accompanies a settled mind, the way a shadow accompanies a body in the light. It does not depart, it is just there because of how you are within. There is something worth noticing in the very grammar of that opening line, and it is the heart of the whole teaching. In the original Pali language, the phrase reads manopubbangama dhamma. It is built around the word mano, which means mind, and a word that means going before, preceding. Manopubbangama, mind preceded. The dhammas, that is, all the states and things of our experience, are mind preceded. Mind goes first. This single phrase, manopubbangama dhamma, is the textual anchor for everything that follows. The mind goes before all things. Everything else comes after. You do not need to hold any of that in your memory. Let the words pass over you like cool water. But perhaps let just this one small thing settle somewhere quiet inside you, the way a leaf settles onto still water and rests there. The very first thing this ancient book wants you to know is that your mind matters. Not in a heavy way. Not as one more thing to manage or fix before you are allowed to rest. Simply as a fact, offered gently. The mind comes first. And so the care of the mind, the gentle straightening of it, the guarding of it, the quieting of it, is not a small thing. It is, in a way, the whole thing. Now you may be wondering about the name itself. Dhammapada. It is a beautiful word to say aloud, slowly. Dhammapada. And like many old and well-loved words, it does not hold just one meaning. It holds several at once, and they all belong. The title is made of two Pali words pressed together. The first is Dhamma. This is one of the great words of the tradition, and it is rich enough to fill a whole night by itself. Dhamma can mean truth. It can mean the teaching, the body of what the Buddha taught. It can mean the law in the sense of the way things naturally are, the deep order of things. It can even mean simply a phenomenon, a thing, a state of mind, which is the very sense it carries in that opening verse where all dhammas are mind preceded. So when you hear Dhamma, do not reach for a single dictionary word. Let it be wide. It is the truth, the teaching, the way things are all at once. And the second word is Pada. Pada is gentler and more grounded. It means foot or step or path. It means a footing, a base, the place where you set your foot down. And it can also mean a word or a line of verse, a foot in the old sense of poetry, a metrical step. So when you put them together, Dhamma and Pada, you can hear why the translators have never quite agreed, and why that disagreement is not a problem, but a richness. Some have rendered the title The Path of Dharma, hearing Pada as path. Some have given us The Footsteps of the Law, hearing Pada as the footprints left along the way. Others have called it Verses on the Teaching, or Words of Truth, hearing Pada as a line of verse, a spoken word of truth. Every one of these is faithful. The plurality is not vagueness, it is honesty. The title itself is doing what the whole book does. It holds more than one meaning in a single gentle phrase and asks you not to grab at it, but to let it be roomy. Tonight, perhaps, you can hold the simplest and warmest of those meanings, words of truth laid down step by step, like footprints on a path you can follow slowly in the dark. And it may help, before we go any deeper, to know where this little book actually lives, where it sits among all the old Buddhist writings, so that you can feel, as we read, that we are walking on solid and well-tended ground, not floating in some vague mist of ancient wisdom. The Dhammapada belongs to a vast collection of scriptures that have been carefully preserved in the Pali language, a collection known as the Pali Canon. You may also hear it called the Tipitaka, which means the three baskets, a lovely old image, as though the entire teaching were gathered into three great woven baskets and kept safe. One of those baskets is the Sutta Pitaka, the basket of discourses, the recorded talks and teachings, and within that basket there is a particular section called the Khuddaka Nikaya. That name is worth a gentle smile because Khuddaka means minor or small. The Khuddaka Nikaya is the collection of minor texts. But here is the tender thing about that name. It means minor in size, not minor in importance. These are the shorter works, the more compact ones, and yet this small basket holds some of the most beloved and most often recited words in all of Buddhism. The Dhammapada is one of them, a small text by length, anything but small in the place it has held in human hearts. And how large is it really? The standard Pali Dhammapada, the version that has been translated more often than any other, contains 423 verses. 423. Each one called a gatha, which simply means a verse, a stanza. And those verses are arranged into 26 chapters. Each chapter is called a vagga. So the book is 26 vaggas, 423 gathas. You do not need to remember those numbers. I offer them only so you can feel the modest, knowable size of the thing. Not an endless sea, but a small, ordered grove of verses you could, if you ever wished, walk through entirely. Tonight we will only visit a few of its quietest corners. And here is something important to understand about the shape of it, because it changes how you listen. The Dhammapada is not a single sermon. It is not one long talk given on one afternoon, with a beginning and a middle and an end. It is an anthology. It is a gathering. The verses were drawn together from across many different discourses, many different occasions, and then arranged by theme. Verses about the mind set together, verses about anger set together, verses about craving set together, and so on through the 26 chapters. It is, in the truest sense, a distillation. Imagine someone who loved a teacher very much, who had heard that teacher speak hundreds of times over many years, and who then sat down and gathered the most luminous, most memorable lines, the ones that stayed with people, the ones easy to carry, and laid them out side by side like pressed flowers in a book. That is the kind of thing the Dhammapada is. Not a transcript of one evening, but the crystallized essence of a lifetime of teaching kept by the community that loved it. These verses are attributed by the tradition to the Buddha himself, the honorific that means the awakened one or the enlightened one. The man behind that title was Siddhartha Gautama, who lived by the traditional dating roughly 25 centuries ago in the Ganges plain of northern India. And here we can be honest in a way that takes nothing from the beauty of the words. Scholars who study these things treat the collection not as a word-for-word stenographer's record of a single speaker, but as the crystallized teaching of the early community that formed around him, the most treasured lines remembered and recited and at last written down. This is not a debunking. It is simply an honest acknowledgement offered gently, and it does not dim the verses at all. When we say the Buddha's words, we are using the traditional and natural way of speaking, and the words themselves, whoever first shaped each turning of phrase, have carried comfort and clarity to countless people across 2,500 years. That is enough. That is more than enough. So this is what we are holding tonight, a small book from a great collection, 423 verses gathered like pressed flowers into 26 chapters. Words of truth laid down step by step, a distillation of a teaching that begins at its very threshold by turning toward your own mind with care, telling you before anything else that the mind comes first, and that the gentle tending of it is the quiet root of a peaceful life. And the chapters themselves are arranged with a kind of wisdom you can almost feel as a shape. We will move through some of them tonight, slowly, in something close to their own order. We have already stood at the doorway in the first chapter, the pairs. From there, the text will lead us soon into the chapter that is entirely about the mind, the one called Cittavagga, which gives us that beautiful image of the mind being straightened the way a maker of arrows straightens his arrow over the warmth of a fire. It will lead us later into the chapter on anger, with its picture of holding a rising temper the way a charioteer holds back a rolling chariot, and further still into the chapter on craving, where wanting is described as a creeping vine, and as a monkey leaping from branch to branch in the forest, always reaching for the next fruit. Each of these is waiting for us a little further along the path. We will come to them gently, in time, but not yet. There is no need to rush toward anything. The slowness is not an obstacle on the way to the teaching. The slowness is the teaching. To read these words without hurry, to let one verse settle fully before reaching for the next, is itself the very practice the book is quietly recommending. A mind that can rest on a single line, unhurried, is a mind already beginning to be straightened, already beginning to be guarded, already beginning to come home. So let us pause here for a moment before we go on. Take a slow, deep breath in gently, and then let it go, slowly, releasing it all the way to the end, the way a tide goes out from a quiet shore. Notice, if you can, how your body has grown a little heavier against the bed since we began. A little more given over to gravity, a little more willing to be held. You do not have to make anything happen. You do not have to follow every word. The words will go on, soft and steady, whether you are tracking them closely or beginning to drift, and either is perfectly fine. There is nothing to figure out here, and nothing you can get wrong. We have only just opened the book. We have heard its very first words, that the mind precedes all things, that what we carry within is followed by what comes to meet us, like the wheel behind the ox, like the shadow that never departs. We have learned the name of the book and how many meanings that name can hold at once. The path, the footsteps, the words of truth. We have learned where it lives in the small but treasured basket of the great collection, and that it is not one sermon, but a gathering of the most luminous lines kept and recited and loved across the centuries. And there is so much more waiting just a little further on when you are ready. There is a single line in this book that the verses themselves call the ancient law, a line that quietly answers the oldest question of how any quarrel anywhere ever truly comes to an end. There is the curious fact that the text uses two different words for what we simply call the mind, and that the difference between them holds, in a way, the whole of the teaching. And there is the image we have already touched, the one that gives this whole night its theme, the restless mind, named by the text itself as flickering and swift, alighting wherever it wishes, so very hard to guard, and the gentle promise that it can be straightened patiently, the way an arrow is straightened, the way water is led into the channel, the way a person, at last, comes to a quiet rest. For now, though, simply breathe. Let the warmth of the words settle over you like a soft blanket drawn up to the chin. When you are ready, and only when you are ready, we will continue together, further along the path, deeper into the quiet. There is no hurry. There is all the night ahead, and the mind, this restless mind that brought you here, is already, in this very moment of listening, beginning to grow a little more still. Take a slow, deep breath now. Let it go without effort. There is nothing to do with the air, but let it move through you, in and then out, like a tide that does not need your help to turn. Notice how the body, when you stop asking anything of it, knows how to soften on its own. The shoulders come down a little, the jaw lets go. The hands, which have held so much today, can simply rest. And when you are ready, we will go on. We have spent these first moments together at the threshold of this old book, learning its name and where it lives. But a name and a shelf are only the doorway. Tonight we are going to step through it slowly, one verse at a time, and the very first thing we find on the other side is the line that the whole text is built upon, the words that in nearly every edition, in nearly every language it has ever been carried into, come first. Here they are. Listen to them the way you would listen to a bell struck once in a far room. Mind precedes all things. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. That is the first verse in the rendering of Acharya Buddharakkhita, a monk who gave much of his life to carrying these lines faithfully into English. And notice what the verse is claiming. It is a large claim made very quietly. It does not shout. It simply says that before the word, before the deed, before the trouble or the kindness that follows, there is the mind. The mind comes first. Everything that happens to us, the text says, is in some way mind-wrought, shaped by the quality of the thought that came before it. And then comes that image of the ox cart. Picture it for a moment there in the dark behind your eyes, a heavy wooden cart on a dusty road, the ox leaning into the yoke, its great patient feet pressing forward, one and then the other. And behind each foot, the wheel, turning, following, rolling exactly where the foot has gone. The wheel does not choose its own path, it simply follows. That, the verse says, is how suffering follows a mind that is troubled and unclear, not as a punishment sent from somewhere else, just as a wheel follows a foot, quietly, inevitably, because that is the shape of the road. But the Dhammapada almost never leaves you in the dark for long. The chapter is called the twin verses, the Yamakavagga, the pairs, and it is called that because the lines come in couplets, each one mirrored by its opposite, the way a single thing casts both a shadow and a light. So the very next verse turns the first one over, gently, like a stone turned to show its other side. Mind precedes all things. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never-departing shadow. His never-departing shadow. Feel the kindness of that image. The first verse gave us the wheel, heavy, grinding, following close behind. And now the second gives us the shadow. A shadow asks nothing of you. It needs no effort to keep. It simply goes where you go, always there, never lost, never left behind. When the mind is clear, the text says happiness is like that, not something you must chase down the road, exhausted, hoping to catch, something that walks with you the whole way, as faithful and as effortless as the shadow at your feet on a bright morning. This is why the book begins here, and not anywhere else. Of all the things the Buddha is remembered to have said, the tradition chose to place these words first. Mind precedes all things. As if to say, before we speak of anger, before we speak of craving, before we speak of the long road and the quiet shore at the end of it, first, understand this one thing. The mind comes first, and so the mind is where the gentleness must begin. You may be wondering, lying there in the dark, what to do with such a claim? And the beautiful thing will be for tonight, nothing. You do not need to fix your mind. You do not need to make it pure by morning. You are simply being shown the foot and the wheel, the shape of the thing, the way a kind teacher shows you a map without once asking you to walk it tonight. The walking can wait. Tonight, there is only the listening. And the word itself, that small word mind, turns out to be richer than it looks. We touched already on the name of the book, on how it holds many meanings at once. The same is true here. The Pali term standing behind this opening line is mano or manas. And the phrase manopubbangama dhamma, mind preceded are the dhammas, is the very anchor of the teaching, the root from which mind precedes all things grows. Mano. The mind as the one that goes before, the forerunner, the thing that arrives first at the door of every experience. But here is the curious detail, the one we promised would hold so much. Further along, when the text comes to its own chapter about the mind, the Cittavagga, the third chapter, it does not use this word at all. It uses a different one, citta, heart, mind. The mind not as the cool forerunner of all things, but as the warm, living center that can be guarded, can be trained, can be straightened like that arrow. We will sit with that difference when we reach it. For now it is enough simply to know that the old language was carefully, that where we have only one little word, mind, the text had at least two, and chose between them with great care. And all of this, the wheel, the shadow, the forerunner, the heart-mind, all of it rests in a particular place. We said the Dhammapada lives in the great collection, but let the names of that home settle over you slowly now, the way you might learn the rooms of a quiet house by lamplight. It belongs to the Pali Canon, the body of scripture preserved in the old Pali tongue. Within that, it sits in the Sutta Pitaka, the basket of discourses, and within that, in a smaller basket still, the Khuddaka Nikaya, the collection of minor texts. Minor, here, meaning small in size, never small in worth. Some of the most beloved lines in all of Buddhism live in that small basket. The way the most precious things in a house are often the smallest ones, kept close. 423 verses in the standard count. 26 chapters, each one a vagga, each one gathering verses that share a theme, the pairs, then heedfulness, then the mind, and on through the long middle of the book to anger and craving and beyond. And remember what kind of book this is. It is not a single sermon spoken from beginning to end on one evening. It is an anthology, a distillation.
Lines spoken across many years and many places, gathered afterward by those who loved them, arranged by themes so that the wisdom on the mind would sit together and the wisdom on anger would sit together, like flowers of one color set in one vase. When you hear these verses, you are hearing the gathered best of a long life of teaching, kept because it was found again and again to be true.
That is the house we have walked into. The path, the small treasured room, the 423 lamps. And tonight we will light only a few of them, slowly, and sit with each one until its light has fully softened the dark. Let us pause here for a little while. There is no need to hold any of it. The wheel and the shadow, the basket within the basket, the two words for the mind. Let them drift now like leaves on slow water. Take one more slow deep breath and feel where the body has already begun to grow heavy against the bed. Notice the quiet that has gathered in the room. And when you are ready, and only then, we will go gently on into the chapter of the mind itself, and the arrow and the patient hand that straightens it. There is a verse in the very first chapter of the Dhammapada, the Yamakavagga, the chapter of pairs. That is not about the mind, or rather, it appears not to be. It appears to be about hatred. But as we come to it now, slowly, you may find that it is still about the mind, that everything in this book is, finally, about the mind. The verse is the fifth of the whole collection, and it says this: hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is an eternal law. The Pali phrase at the end, essa dhammo sanantano, is one of the oldest phrases in the book. Sanantano means ancient, eternal, from the beginning. Not a new discovery, not a modern insight, an ancient law. The way water flows downward, the way fire gives off heat. It was true before the Buddha named it, will be true long after we are gone. Sit with it for just a moment before we move on. Hatred is never appeased by hatred. In this world, the text says, not in some other more peaceful world, in this one. The world of difficult relatives, of misunderstandings that last for years, of quarrels that start over something small and grow, somehow, into walls. In this exact world, the appeasement of hatred by more hatred does not work, has never worked, is a law like gravity, like the tide. You may have felt this. Most people at some point in their lives have tried the other way, have answered coldness with coldness, or silence with silence, or a hurtful word with another hurtful word, and have noticed, without quite naming it, that the problem did not dissolve, that the effort only added to the weight, that something in them grew heavier, not lighter. The Dhammapada says, yes, that is the law. You were not failing at the technique. The technique itself was the wrong one. Non-hatred alone appeases hatred. The Pali word here, which translators render as non-hatred or love or non-anger, is abhyapaja, the absence of ill will. Not a grand, strenuous act of love. The simpler thing, the absence of more ill will. Stopping the wheel rather than turning it another time. This is the ancient law. Esa dhammo sanantano. And the verse that follows, verse 6, comes quietly behind it, like a hand on the shoulder. It says, "There are those who do not realize that one day we all must die. But those who do realize this settle their quarrels." It is a gentle verse. It does not instruct. It only observes. There are those who forget mortality or push it to the very edges of their days, carefully behind the tasks and the plans and the noise, and so they keep quarreling because they have convinced themselves, without quite knowing they have, that there is unlimited time for the quarrel to last and unlimited time for it to be resolved later. And then there are those who have let the fact of death become not a frightening thing, but a clarifying one, a softening one. The person I am arguing with will one day not be here. I will one day not be here. The quarrel will not come with us. Then what is it for? People who have sat with someone near the end, who have held a hand in a hospital room, or said a last goodbye, often say that something shifts in the days and weeks after. The small disputes seem smaller. The held resentment feels less worth the holding, not because grief has made them sentimental, but because something true has come very close, and in its closeness it has reorganized what matters. The 6th verse of the Dhammapada knows this. The ancient teachers knew it. And on a night like this, when you are lying still, perhaps not so far from the feeling that much of the day was noise, perhaps the ancient law and the softening that comes from knowing all things end is not so remote. Perhaps it is very close to where you already are. Let us breathe that in gently, and then let us turn, a little more slowly, to one of the things the dossier of this book preserves most carefully, because it is one of the most careful distinctions in all of it, the distinction between two words, two Pali words for the mind. The first is manas, or mano. The root shifts depending on the grammatical form. You heard it at the very beginning of the text in the first verse. Manopubbangama dhamma, mind preceded, are all things. It is the word the Dhammapada uses when it speaks of the mind as the originating force. The mind that comes before. The shaper of all experience, the source from which action and speech flow, the way a river's source is somewhere high and invisible and everything downstream comes from it. Manas is the mind as architect, as the thing that makes everything else. The second word is citta, and citta is the word the next chapter uses. The Cittavagga, the mind, the third chapter of the book. Citta means, perhaps most accurately, heart-mind. It is the mind as something felt, something warm or agitated or still. If Manas is the architect, citta is the person who lives in the house, the one who wakes at 3 in the morning, the one who replays the afternoon's conversation. The one who wanders, drifts, circles, lands on something sharp and then moves to something else, and then comes back to the sharp thing again, because something in it is still unresolved. The reason this matters is this. The first two verses tell you that the mind, manas, precedes all things. That your experience of this night, of this body, of the words settling around you, arises first in the mind. That is the scope of what we are talking about. But the Cittavagga then turns to a finer, more intimate question. And what is that mind like, moment to moment? What does it do when you are not watching it? What does it do when you lie down and ask it to be quiet? The answer the third chapter gives is honest, and it is kind in its honesty. The chapter opens with verse 33. The flickering, fickle mind, difficult to guard, difficult to control. The wise person straightens it as a fletcher straightens an arrow. A fletcher is a maker of arrows, someone who works with wood and flight. An arrow, you may know, does not come from the tree already straight. It grows with the wood, which bends and curves as trees do, following water and wind and light. The fletcher's entire skill, the whole art, is in the straightening, heating the shaft, checking it against a straight eye, turning it slowly between the hands, applying patient pressure at exactly the right place, checking again, heating again if needed, checking again. It is not violent work. It is attentive work, slow and precise and deeply patient. And that, verse 33 says, is how the wise person works with the mind, slowly, with attention, without forcing. The fletcher does not hate the arrow for having a curve. The curve is simply what wood does. The mind's flickering, fickle quality, its tendency to dart and wander and loop, is not a moral failing. It is simply what mind does. The straightening is not punishment. It is practice. Patient, gentle, returning again and again. The word translated as flickering and fickle is the Pali Canon, which also means trembling, unsteady, quick. Picture a flame in a room where there is the faintest draught. It is burning. It is giving light. But it leans, first this way, then that. You cannot quite fix its shape. That is citta, the heart-mind, in the untrained state. Not broken, not wrong, trembling. And then, verse 35, hard to restrain, swift, alighting wherever it wishes. The mind is difficult to subdue. The taming of the mind is good. A tamed mind brings happiness. Hard to restrain, swift, alighting wherever it wishes. There is something almost fond in the way this verse describes the mind, as if the teacher has watched it with a kind of affectionate recognition. A swift thing, a thing with its own preferences, its own landings. It alights, as a bird alights, on what it finds interesting or worrying or unresolved. And you may have noticed this tonight, even now, even here. A thought arrived that had nothing to do with the Dhammapada. Something about tomorrow, perhaps. Something about a person you know. Something small and specific and entirely beside the point of this quiet evening. And yet there it was, landing. Alighting wherever it wished. The verse does not say this is intolerable. It says this is the nature of the untrained mind, and then it says something that carries real warmth. The taming of the mind is good. A tamed mind brings happiness, not the suppression of the mind, not its silencing, taming, the way a wild thing with patient gentleness becomes no longer frantic, still itself but quieter, still alive but no longer darting. And then verse 36, which turns toward us more directly. Let the discerning person guard the mind so hard to detect and extremely subtle, seizing whatever it desires. A guarded mind brings happiness. Hard to detect, extremely subtle. The mind does its work in ways that are difficult to see clearly. You think you are reacting to a situation when you are actually reacting to a memory. You think you are anxious about tomorrow when you are actually still holding something from 10 years ago. The mind seizes, the verse says, grasps at what it desires or fears or wants to push away. And so much of this happens beneath the surface of what we would call thinking, below where we normally look. To guard the mind is not to police it. It is closer to what a caring host does, paying attention to what is happening in the house, noticing when something has arrived that wasn't invited, not throwing it out immediately, just noticing. The noticing is itself the guarding. Let us pause here. Let us rest for just a few moments in the space between verses. Take a slow, unhurried breath, and as you breathe out, let your shoulders release downward, just slightly, toward the bed. There is nothing you need to hold right now. The mind can alight wherever it wishes, even here, even in this quiet, and that is fine. It is what minds do. You are not doing it wrong. Notice, if you can, how the body feels against what it is resting on. The small weight of the arms, the way the chest rises and falls without any effort at all. And when you are ready, slowly, in your own time, we will go just a little deeper into the Cittavagga, the chapter of the mind. Verse 37 is the next one. It has always been one of the more mysterious lines in the chapter, and it is worth moving through it gently. The mind wanders far, travels alone, is bodiless, and lies in a cave. Those who subdue this mind are freed from the bonds of Mara. The mind wanders far, we know this. Left without direction, the mind travels great distances in a single moment, not in space, but in time and association. A smell can send the mind back 20 years. A word can open into a whole landscape of feeling. It travels alone in the sense that no one can accompany you into your own inner experience. Even two people who love each other deeply sitting in the same room are each wandering in a private country, bodiless. The mind has no hands, no weight, no location in the body that you could point to precisely and say, here, this is where the mind is. It is felt. In the chest sometimes, in the throat, in the tightening of the stomach. But it is not those places. It moves through the body and is none of it. And then it lies in a cave. This is the Pali word guha, which means cave, but also means the body itself. The body as a sheltered hollow, a place the mind inhabits and moves through. The mind lies in the cave of the body, resting inside you all this time, even now, traveling in its vast private landscapes while the body lies perfectly still. Mara is the figure in Buddhist tradition who represents all the forces that bind us to suffering, temptation, delusion, the grasping after what does not last, the fear of what cannot be avoided. It is not a demon in the literal sense. It is a name for the weight of all the patterns and attachments that keep the mind from being free. The bonds of Mara are the things that hold the mind in its loops, the recurring worry, the old grievance, the persistent wish that things had been different or would be different or that you were different. Those who subdue this mind, this wandering, bodiless, cave-dwelling mind, are freed from those bonds. Not by force, not by suppressing the wandering, by subduing, which is a word that means bringing to stillness, bringing home as you might bring a wide-ranging, gentle animal back to a quiet place, not broken, not conquered, stilled. Take a moment with that image, the mind brought back from its far wandering, returned to the cave, the body, the breath, the weight of the arms against the bed. It is already here. You are already here. The subduing is not something you have to do vigorously. It is already beginning just by your lying still in the dark, just by your allowing this quiet voice to be the thing the mind follows for a little while instead of its own circuits. And now, very gently, the chapter turns toward perhaps its most tender pair of verses 42 and 43. They come together as a natural pair, which is fitting since we are still in the tradition of the Yamakavagga, the tradition of paired contrasts that runs through the whole book. Verse 42. Whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy, or a hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind inflicts on oneself a greater harm. Read it again, slowly, in the interior of yourself. Whatever harm an enemy may do to you. The worst a genuine adversary could arrange, the sharpest thing a person who wished you ill could manage, an ill-directed mind does a greater harm to the person who carries it. Not to your enemy, to yourself. This is not a small claim. The verse is asking you to consider that the most dangerous force in your life is not outside you, is not a person, a circumstance, a piece of bad luck. The ill-directed mind, the one that turns its full force against its own host, through worry, through harsh self-judgment, through the relentless rehearsal of what has gone wrong, through the refusal of rest, that mind is to the person carrying it a greater adversary than any external one could be. This is not said to shame anyone. The Dhammapada is not a shaming text. It is said, I think, the way a very kind teacher would say it, to help you see where the actual danger is. Not out there, not in others, in here, in the quality of the mind's direction. An ill-directed mind, what does that mean exactly? In the context of the Cittavagga, in the context of all the verses we have been moving through, it means a mind pointed habitually at what hurts it, a mind that has never been shown how to guard itself, how to return from its wandering, how to settle. Not a bad mind, not a broken mind, a mind that has simply never been taught the art of the fletcher. And then verse 43, which is the shadow completing the pair. Neither mother, father, nor any other relative can do one as much good as one's own rightly directed mind. The tenderness of this verse is considerable. The Buddha is not dismissing the love of parents. He is saying something precise. Even that love, which is, for most of us, the deepest and most encompassing love we have ever been given, the love that held us before we could speak or ask for it, even that love cannot do for you what a rightly directed mind can do, because no one else can direct your mind for you. A parent can hold you, feed you, protect you from many things. A parent cannot step inside your thinking and soften it, cannot be there in the 3 o'clock dark, cannot do from the outside what only the quality of your own awareness can do from the inside. A rightly directed mind, the phrase is exact and simple, not a perfect mind, not an enlightened mind, a rightly directed one. A mind that when it begins its midnight wandering has learned to notice. A mind that when it arrives at the old grievance or the new worry has practiced something like the fletcher's patience, applying gentle pressure, returning to straight, checking again. A mind that knows it can be guided. This is not a life's work you have to complete tonight. It is simply a direction, a turning of the face, like turning to face the morning light when it first comes through the window. Not fully day yet, just the first turn toward it. These are the verses at the heart of the Cittavagga, the mind chapter. The chapter whose name gives us citta, the heart-mind, the living and trainable center of a person's inner life. We began with manas, mind preceding all things, the architect of experience. And we have arrived at citta, the mind as it is, in the body, in the night, flickering and wandering and seizing and resting, capable of harm and capable of a happiness deeper than anything that comes from outside. The distinction is a gift. It means the mind is not just a mechanism that produces your life, it is also something that can be met, worked with, cared for in the way a fletcher cares for wood, not with violence, with patient, skilled attention. Let us pause here again, a longer pause this time. Breathe slowly in and then all the way out until the chest is empty and then fills again of its own accord. Feel the weight of the body, the back of the head, the shoulders, the length of the arms, each point of contact with what is beneath you. Heavy, still, already resting. You have been carrying something today, perhaps many things. The mind wandering far, traveling alone in its private landscapes, carrying its worries and its replays and its concerns about tomorrow. All of that is allowed. All of that is what minds do. The Dhammapada knew about this mind. It named it 2,500 years ago in a language no longer spoken as a daily tongue in a land very far from this bed, under a sky the teachers would have called the same sky. The mind lies in a cave, you lie in yours. There is a teaching in that, and for now, simply let the weight of the body be the only thing. When you are ready, in your own time, in your own breath, we will continue. There is no hurry. There is nowhere else to be. We turn now to verses 42 and 43, the final pair we will sit with in this chapter on the mind. They are placed near the close of Cittavagga for a reason. By the time you arrive at them, you have already heard about the flickering mind, the fleeing mind, the mind lying in a cave, the mind freed from the bonds of Mara. And now the text asks a final question about direction, not about stilling the mind exactly, about where it is pointed. Verse 42, the Buddha says in Buddharakkhita's rendering, whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy, or a hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind inflicts on oneself a greater harm. Sit with that for a moment. Not that enemies do no harm, not that hatred causes no wound, but that the ill-directed mind, the citta that is unguarded, uncared for, turned against itself, does more damage than any of them. This is not philosophy, this is something most of us have lived. There is the argument that ended weeks ago, the conversation in which something was said that cannot be unsaid, and it has been settled in the outside world in the sense that nothing more will be spoken about it. But inside in the cave, the mind returns to it. It replays the moment. It sharpens the words. It imagines what should have been said, what might have been answered, how the other person must have meant what they did not say aloud. The enemy, long gone, is not doing this. The hater, somewhere else entirely, is perhaps asleep. The mind is doing it, the ill-directed mind. And the harm it inflicts in that quiet room is cumulative, patient, and entirely self-administered. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a woman, a baker by trade, who had run a small shop in a town near the sea for nearly 20 years. She had a sister, and one spring at a wedding, 35 people, a long table, paper lanterns that swayed in the wind from the water. Something happened. A remark was made. Whether it was intended as cruelty or whether it was simply careless, she was never certain, and that uncertainty was perhaps the worst of it. Her sister said something, in passing, about the shop, about the prices, about the quality, said it lightly to someone else, not to her, and the baker heard it sideways, the way you hear things that were not quite meant for you. That was 7 years before the night we are considering. In those 7 years, the two women had seen each other perhaps 6 times. Civil, careful. Nothing more was ever said about the remark. The sister had likely forgotten it. People do forget the things they say sideways at weddings. But the baker had not forgotten. And in the particular way the mind does its private work, she had built from that moment a structure. A case, you might say, a very thorough and well-evidenced case, that the remark was the symptom of something much older and much more deliberate. She had traced it back through memory, through childhood, through decades of small moments that now, in hindsight, arranged themselves as evidence. Each time she lay down at night, the case got a little more built. The sister was not doing this, the sister was asleep. And this is what verse 42 is describing. Not a dramatic enemy, not open hatred, something quieter and more ordinary. The mind, untended, building its case in the dark, doing to us more damage than the original event ever could. The baker was not a bad person, she was a tired person. And the mind that replays and sharpens and builds is not a broken mind. It is a mind that has not yet been met with the right kind of attention. A mind that has not yet been, and here the text would use a word that sounds small but is enormous, tamed. Now, verse 43, its mirror image. Neither mother, father, nor any other relative can do one as much good as one's own rightly directed mind. This is the completion of the pair. The ill-directed mind harms beyond what any enemy can do. The rightly directed mind helps beyond what any kin can do. Parent, sibling, beloved, all the relationships of love and care that sustain a life, the rightly directed citta does more than any of them. Which sounds, at first, like it is diminishing love. It is not diminishing love. It is pointing to something within love that is often overlooked. That the quality of the mind you bring to your life, to your relationships, your suffering, your nights, your mornings, shapes everything that those relationships touch. A mother's love cannot undo what an unguarded mind does to a child's own thinking about themselves. A father's steadiness cannot override what an ill-directed mind tells itself in the night. But a rightly directed mind, a citta that has been met with patience, guarded with some care, turned gently toward the wholesome rather than the corrosive, that becomes the ground everything else grows from. The point is not that people do not matter. The point is that the mind is prior. Manas precedes the dhammas. Citta, when rightly directed, makes everything possible that love needs to do its work. Let us return to the baker for a moment. On the night we are considering, she had baked later than usual, and she was tired in the particular bone-level way that comes not from physical exertion alone, but from years of carrying something that has no natural exit. She was lying in the dark. The case about her sister had begun its familiar assembly. The wedding, the lanterns, the 35 people, and what was said. And then, and this is the strange, quiet thing that sometimes happens when the body is very tired, she noticed that she was doing it, not the content of it, just the act itself. The mind, moving, building, sharpening. She did not stop it. She had no teaching at hand. She simply noticed it, in the way you notice sometimes that you have been holding your breath. She breathed out. The case did not dissolve. These things do not dissolve in a single exhalation. But for a moment, for one breath, the mind was simply the mind, not the prosecution, not the verdict, not the long architecture of grievance. Just the mind, tired, in the dark, lying in a bed, aware of itself. That moment, that single instant of noticing, is what the Dhammapada is pointing toward. Not the eradication of difficulty, the turning of the eye, the beginning of the guard, the first breath of the rightly directed mind, which does not have to be grand to be real. The text says, guard the subtle mind. seizing whatever it desires. A guarded mind brings happiness. Happiness is a word that can feel very large at night when happiness seems far away. But in Pali, the word used in these verses is often sukha. And sukha is not the brightness of great joy, though it can include that. Sukha is closer to ease, to the absence of friction, to the quality of a wheel turning smoothly on a well-made axle. The rightly directed mind does not guarantee that nothing will go wrong. It does not ensure the sister will apologize, or the argument will be settled, or the long-held case will simply fall away. It offers something quieter, an interior ease, a turning that is smooth, the ability to carry what must be carried without the additional weight of the ill-directed mind's own additions. A guarded mind brings sukha, ease, a kind of gentleness toward the self. We have spent much of this part of our time together in Cittavagga, inside those early verses of the mind chapter. The fletcher, the arrow, the flickering flame, the mind alighting wherever it wishes, the cave, the bonds of Mara, and now the pair of verses that close this arc. The enemy within and the kin within. Before we move deeper into the text, let us pause again. Take a slow breath all the way in, and then a slow release, longer on the exhale than on the inhale if that feels natural. Notice the mind, not to examine it, not to direct it anywhere, not to guard it in this moment with any effort. Simply notice that it is there, moving perhaps, settling perhaps, somewhere between the two. This, the noticing, is already the beginning of what the text is describing, the citta aware of itself, lying in its cave, not fleeing, not seized by what it desires. Simply here. The body is heavy. The breath is slow. The room, whatever room this is quiet enough. You do not need to resolve anything tonight. You do not need to build or dismantle any case. The baker lay in the dark and breathed out, and that was enough. You can do the same. Breathe in and then out, and let the mind be where it is, knowing that a mind that can notice itself has already turned by some small fraction in the direction of ease. When you are ready, there is more. We will move now into Kodhavagga, the chapter on anger, where the text takes the restless mind and asks what it does when it is provoked. What happens in the body and the heart when the heat rises? And what the charioteer knows that others only pretend to know. But first, this breath, and then the next one. We continue when you are. There is a chapter of the Dhammapada that does not concern itself with the mind in its usual drifting state. Not the wandering, the flickering, the mind that alights wherever it wishes. This chapter is concerned with something quieter and more foundational than that, the quality of attention that makes all the rest possible. The Pali word is appamada, and tonight, before we enter the heat of Kodhavagga and the deep roots of Tanhavagga, we rest here for a moment in the chapter called Yamakavagga. Appamada. It is usually translated as heedfulness, sometimes as vigilance or conscientiousness or diligence. The prefix a in Pali works like a negation, so appamada is literally the absence of pamada, the absence of heedlessness, of carelessness, of the drift that comes when you are not quite present to what you are doing or what you are allowing. You might think of it as the quality of being awake inside your own life, not startled awake, not anxious and hypervigilant, but gently, quietly present, noticing without being seized, moving through the day with a soft thread of awareness running through everything you do. The chapter on heedfulness contains one of the most striking single lines in the entire collection. Verse 21. Let us hear it now, slowly. Heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are as if already dead. That word, the deathless, is not a metaphor in the original. It is a standard epithet in the Pali for nibbana, the final release from the cycle of suffering and rebirth. The tradition calls it the deathless amata because it is not subject to the rising and falling that everything else is subject to. The heedful do not die, the verse says, in the sense that heedfulness is the quality that leads, eventually, all the way to that unconditioned place.
And heedlessness, the drift, the inattention, the going through the motions, is described as already a kind of death. Not a dramatic death, a quiet one. The life that passes while you were not quite in it.
This is one of those verses that can sound harsh if you read it quickly, but in the context of the whole text, in the slow company of these teachings, it lands differently. It is not a reprimand, it is an invitation. And the invitation is this: the very fact that you are listening, that you are here, that you have chosen to bring some portion of your attention to these words tonight, is already a movement toward heedfulness. The listening is the practice. The attending is the path. Appamada, the text says, is the foundation of all progress. The other teachings, on the mind, on anger, on craving, presuppose it. You cannot straighten the arrow if you have not first noticed the arrow exists and that it is crooked. You cannot check the chariot if you have fallen asleep at the reins. Heedfulness is prior to all of it. It is the quality that makes the other qualities possible. Let this sit with you gently, not as instruction, not as something to do differently tomorrow, simply as a recognition that the quality of presence you bring to any moment changes the texture of that moment, that a life lived with even a little more attention, with not more effort, just more presence, is a different kind of life than one lived on automatic, carried along by habit and reaction and the noise of the unconsidered mind. The heedful do not die. And here you are, attending. Now the text moves us forward still within the broader arc of inner mastery and offers us two more verses that belong together as a natural pair. They speak about the same thing from slightly different angles, what it means to conquer not the world outside, but the territory within. Verse 103. Though one may conquer 1,000 men in battle, yet the greatest of conquerors is one who conquers himself. 1,000 men. The text is not being modest with its comparison. It is choosing the most enormous imaginable feat of external power and setting it beside a single internal one and saying, this is greater. The person who has turned the attention inward and found some measure of steadiness there, that person has done something more difficult than any army has ever done on any field. We live in a world that celebrates the outward victory, the achievement, the prize, the measurable result. And there is nothing wrong with any of that. But the Dhammapada keeps returning to this other kind of effort, the one that leaves no visible mark, the one that happens in the space between a provocation and a response, the one that consists of not being seized, not being swept, not being carried off by the current of whatever arises. The greatest of conquerors, the text means it, and then immediately following this, the craftsman image returns. Verse 80. Irrigators channel water, fletchers straighten arrows, carpenters shape wood. The wise control themselves. Notice how the text works here. It does not explain self-control in abstract terms. It places it in a row with concrete, skilled work. Water that has to be directed gently along channels carved for it. The arrow under the fletcher's hands, wood warmed slowly. the eye moving down the shaft to find the point where the truth lies, and then the careful coaxing, the small, precise corrections until the line is straight. The carpenter with chisel and grain working with the material, not against it, finding what the wood wants to become. And then the wise, who do this same kind of careful, skilled, patient work with themselves. This is not a harsh teaching, it is a craft teaching. The fletcher does not hate the arrow for being crooked. The carpenter does not berate the wood for having knots. They simply work with what is there patiently, with attention, because that is what the craft requires. The wise, the text suggests, bring the same quality of patient craft to the mind, to the anger when it rises, to the craving when it pulls, to the heedlessness when it drifts. They do not condemn it, they work with it, slowly, repeatedly, with the steadiness of someone who knows the work takes time. These two verses together will be the conqueror of 1,000 men and the irrigator channeling water, give us the full picture of what inner mastery looks like in this text. It is simultaneously the greatest achievement imaginable and the most ordinary daily work, heroic in what it accomplishes, humble in how it is done. One quiet breath, one small redirection, one moment of noticing before the reaction fires, repeated over a lifetime into something like freedom. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a slow, deep breath in and let it go slowly. Notice the weight of the body where it meets the bed. The chest, the arms, the legs, the back of the head. Let the breath settle into its own rhythm without you having to manage it. The mind that is listening to these words, even now, even as it drifts and resurfaces and drifts again, is doing exactly what verse 35 describes. It is the mind that is hard to restrain, swift, alighting wherever it wishes. And it is also the mind that keeps returning, that notices the wandering and comes back. That is the appamada. That is the heedfulness. It does not require perfection. It only requires return. You are already practicing. You have been practicing this whole time. When you are ready, we will continue. There is a chapter in the Dhammapada called Kodhavagga. Koda is the Pali word for anger, not a mild word. Anger, in the tradition, is one of the three poisons, alongside greed and delusion, that feed the restless cycle of suffering. And the chapter addresses it not with condemnation, but with something more interesting, with the image of a craft. This is one of the things that makes this text remarkable. It does not simply say, do not be angry. It does not moralize. It offers, instead, a picture. And the picture it offers is this, verse 222. One who can check rising anger as a charioteer checks a rolling chariot. Him I call a true charioteer. Others merely hold the reins. Let that land for a moment. Others merely hold the reins. The image is exact and physical. Think of a chariot moving at speed, wooden wheels on a road, the horses pulling, the whole vehicle gathering momentum. There is a point, as the chariot picks up speed, where holding the reins is no longer sufficient. Holding is passive. A beginner holds. The true charioteer does something more active and more precise than holding. They read the movement, they feel the pull through the leather in their hands. They know the difference between a chariot that is running well and one that is beginning to run away. And they act before the crisis, not after. They check, they redirect. They do not let the horses carry them somewhere they did not choose to go. This is what the text says about anger, that there is a moment, a window, between the rising of the heat and the point at which the chariot is beyond checking. Everyone who has ever been truly angry knows this window exists. It is a physical thing. The flush in the face, the tightening in the throat, the sudden narrowing of the world to the single point of grievance. And in that moment, there is still a choice, but only if you are attending.
Only if you are holding the reins consciously, not just gripping them out of habit. Only if you are, in the text's word, heedful. The true charioteer, not the one who never gets angry. The text is not asking the impossible, but the one who can check the anger as it rises, who feels the horses beginning to run and does the skilled thing, the practiced thing, the thing that can only be done if you have been paying attention all along.
Others merely hold the reins. This line is one of the quiet devastations of the text, because we all know what it means to merely hold the reins, to be present in form but not in function, to look like someone in control of the vehicle while the vehicle goes wherever it wants. We have all been that person, in a conversation, in a relationship, in a moment of conflict where we said later, I don't know what came over me, I don't know where that came from, the chariot ran, and we were inside it. The teaching is not blame, it is instruction. It is a craft teaching. The charioteer is made, not born. The skill is developed through practice and through the willingness to stay at the reins, even when, especially when, the horses pull. Verse 223. Conquer anger by non-anger. Conquer evil by good. Conquer the miser by giving. Conquer the liar by truth. This verse has a different quality than the charioteer image, where that verse was a picture, vivid, kinetic. This one is a list. 4 reversals. And each one follows the same logic. The way out of something is not through more of it, but through the introduction of its opposite. Not as a strategy, as a kind of metaphysical law. The way fire goes out is not by adding more fire, but by removing the fuel, or by introducing something that changes the conditions entirely. Non-anger does not mean passivity. It means the deliberate act of bringing a different quality into a space that anger has occupied. And in that act, something shifts, not always immediately, not always dramatically. But the equation changes. Conquer anger by non-anger. Conquer evil by good. Conquer the miser by giving, conquer the liar by truth. The fourfold reversal, the text offers it as if it was simple, and in one sense it is. The principle is not complicated. The practice of actually being the non-anger when anger is what is present, of being the good when evil is what is in the room. That is the whole of the work of a lifetime. The charioteer's work. Done quietly, again and again, until the hands know the reins, and the body knows the moment, and the choice becomes, over time, something closer to nature. And then verse 221. Give up anger. Abandon pride. Transcend every fetter. Suffering never befalls one who clings to nothing of mind and body. Clings to nothing of mind and body. This is a harder teaching. Give up anger feels like something with a handle. You can imagine reaching in and releasing a grip. Abandon pride is similar, but clings to nothing of mind and body touches the deeper teaching of the whole tradition. The one about the nature of self. The idea that what we take to be solid and fixed, this person, these thoughts, this personality, these preferences and aversions, is more like weather than like stone. That clinging to it, treating it as what must be defended and preserved, is itself the root of the suffering that follows. Suffering never befalls one who clings to nothing. Not clinging is not the same as not caring. It is not the same as not engaging, not loving, not being fully present in the life you are in. It is more like the open hand that can hold much because it grips nothing. The charioteer who can check the horses because the hands are responsive, not clenched.
Anger requires something to cling to, a grievance, a wrong, a version of events that must be defended. And when that clinging releases even slightly, the anger finds less purchase. The rolling chariot slows. Give up anger. The text says it plainly, not as a demand, but as a direction of travel, a bearing. Not something accomplished in a night, but something pointed toward quietly, with the patient attention of the fletcher at the arrow, the carpenter at the grain.
The Kodhavagga is a short chapter, but it is dense with these images, these reversals, these small, precise teachings, and all of them circle the same center, that what rises in the heart when we are provoked is not the final word, that between the rising and the action there is a space, and in that space there is choice, and in that choice there is, slowly, practiced into being, freedom. Now the text carries us to a longer chapter. Chapter 24. The Tanhavagga. Tanha is the Pali word for craving. And if anger is the fire that flares when the world opposes what we want, craving is the quieter, more persistent force underneath. The reaching, the wanting, the fundamental orientation toward more and other and different. The second noble truth of the Buddha's teaching names tanha, craving, as the root of suffering. And the Tanhavagga at 26 verses is one of the longest chapters in the text, reflecting how central and how layered this teaching is. The chapter opens its account of craving with one of the most vivid natural images in the whole collection, verse 334. The craving of a heedless person grows like a creeper. He jumps from life to life like a monkey seeking fruit in the forest. The creeper here is named in the original, the maluva vine, a tropical climbing plant. If you have seen such vines in a forest, you know what the image means. They are not aggressive in the way a fire is aggressive. They are patient. They begin small, finding a surface, winding around it, climbing. And then, given time and inattention, they cover everything. The tree beneath the maluva vine does not fall at once. It is simply, gradually occluded, wrapped in a growth that was not its own, until the original shape is lost. This is what craving does to the mind that does not attend to it. Not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow encircling, a gradual wrapping of the attention around wanting. Wanting this, wanting not that, wanting things to be other than they are, until the mind forgets what it was like before the wanting was the entire weather of the interior. The heedless person does not notice the creeper growing. The heedful person does. The heedful person sees the small tendril and recognizes it for what it is. And then the monkey seeking fruit in the forest, he jumps from life to life, the verse says. Life to life in the Buddhist understanding carries a cosmological weight, the cycle of rebirth, samsara, the round. But even without that frame, the image is recognizable. The mind that craves is a monkey in a forest, moving from branch to branch, reaching for this fruit and then finding it, already reaching for the next, never quite landing, never quite satisfied. The movement itself becoming the default state so that the possibility of sitting still, of finding the fruit at hand to be enough, becomes harder and harder to imagine. Let us hear verse 335. Whoever is overcome by this wretched, clinging craving, his sorrows grow like grass after rain. Grass after rain, you know this image, the speed of it. The way, after real rain, after the kind of rain that soaks into the ground and changes the conditions, the green comes up faster than seems possible, overnight almost. And that is what sorrow does, the text says, when craving is what drives us. The conditions are always there for it to grow, and it grows quickly, given any opening at all. There is something worth pausing on in this verse, because the word translated as wretched is not a moral judgment in the original so much as a quality description. The clinging craving is wretched the way a wound is wretched, not culpable, but genuinely causing harm. The tradition is not asking you to feel guilty for craving. It is asking you to see clearly what craving does, to recognize the grass growing, to understand that this quality of reaching and being dissatisfied and reaching again is what is growing the sorrows, not as punishment for a character flaw, but as simple consequence of a kind of movement. And then the text offers, a few verses later, one of its deepest images, verse 338. Just as a tree, though cut down, sprouts up again if its roots remain uncut and firm, so until the craving that lies dormant is rooted out, suffering springs up again and again. The tree. Cut down, which in the agricultural context of the world where these verses were written, would have been a familiar sight. You fell a tree or you cut it back, and you think the work is done. And then, weeks or months later, new growth appears. A shoot from the stump, a tendril from a root, because the tree was not ended, the root remained, and from the root the tree returns as certain and as patient as before. This is what the text is saying about craving, that it is possible to address it at the surface, to stop the behavior, to interrupt the pattern, to cut the tree, and still miss the root. The root is not the action, but the orientation, the fundamental reaching that underlies the reaching. And until that, the lying dormant, the text calls it, the deep uncut root of it, until that is genuinely seen and understood, and over time released, the suffering will grow back. Not because the person has failed, but because roots are below the surface, and cutting at the surface does not reach them. This is why the Dhammapada returns again and again to awareness, to heedfulness, to the careful attending that can go below the surface of behavior to the root of the movement itself. The fletcher does not straighten only the tip of the arrow. The carpenter does not plane only the top surface of the wood. The work goes all the way through. And the work with craving, the text suggests, goes all the way down. Into the held breath before the wanting. Into the quality of the want itself. Into whether this reaching is a reaching towards something needed or a reaching away from stillness. Suffering springs up again and again until the root is rooted out. The text does not say this will be done quickly. It does not say it is easy. It says it is possible. And it says that the path to it, the appamada, the heedfulness, the attending, is available right now in this breath, in this quiet room, in this moment of choosing to stay with the stillness rather than follow the pull of the mind toward its next wanting. Let this rest with you now. A small pause and then something that speaks to how widely and how early these verses traveled. The Dhammapada we have been sitting with tonight is the Pali version, the one preserved in the Pali Canon, in the Khuddaka Nikaya, in the tradition of Theravada Buddhism as it developed in Sri Lanka and across Southeast Asia. It's 423 verses in 26 vaggas. The collection that Max Müller translated into English in 1881, opening it to the Western world. The one that monks in Thailand, in Myanmar, in Cambodia, in Laos have memorized and recited as part of daily practice for centuries because its verse form, the gatha, makes it easy to carry in the body, to repeat until the words become breath. But there were other versions. The Dhammapada circulated widely, and the manuscripts that survive across different languages and traditions tell us something about how far these teachings traveled and how early. Among the oldest Buddhist manuscripts ever discovered are a group of texts written in a language called Gandhari, in the Kharoshthi script on birch bark scrolls that have survived in the dry conditions of Central Asia. Among these texts is a version of the Dhammapada, the Gandhari Dhammapada. Rough estimates place these manuscripts in approximately the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era. These are not copies of the Pali text. They are parallel recensions, related versions, that developed in different communities, preserving the same core teachings in different forms. The birch bark is a detail worth holding for a moment. Birch bark is light, and it can be rolled, carried, transported across difficult terrain. Monks and traders and pilgrims moved through Central Asia along routes connecting India to China, to the Central Asian kingdoms, westward. And among the things they carried, written on materials light enough to carry, were these verses. This is the Dhammapada on birch bark, travelling. There is also the Patna Dhammapada, another Indic recension, discovered and catalogued in the modern era, and the Sanskrit Udanavarga, a Sanskrit collection that shares many verses with the Pali Dhammapada, but is longer, drawn from a different but related textual tradition. These parallel versions are not contradictions, they are confirmations. They tell us that the core of what the Dhammapada preserves, the teaching on the mind, on anger, on craving, on the wise and the fool, was circulating widely enough, early enough, that it left traces in multiple languages, on multiple kinds of material, across thousands of miles of terrain. The verses survived not because they were locked away and preserved by specialists, though scholars have certainly played a role. They survived because they were useful, because they were the kind of thing you could carry in your memory across a mountain pass and speak aloud in a community you had never visited before, and people would recognize something in them. Because they addressed not an arcane problem, but the most intimate one, the one happening right now in the dark, in the mind that cannot stop moving. How do we live with this? How does the craving release? How does the anger check? How does the wandering mind, fickle and swift and alighting wherever it wishes, come to some measure of stillness? The Gandhari Dhammapada on birch bark, the Patna Dhammapada, the Sanskrit Udanavarga. 3 witnesses, in addition to the Pali text, that these words have been travelling for a very long time. Long before Max Muller gave them English, long before the internet, long before any of this. A monk rolled the bark and tucked it into what he was carrying, and somewhere along the road, someone else unrolled it and read it by whatever light was available, and found that the words still arrived. Let us pause here. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out. The body is heavy and still. The room is quiet. Whatever the mind has been reaching for tonight, whatever small creeper of wanting or worry has been winding around the edges of sleep, you do not have to address it now. You do not have to cut it down or root it out. You only have to notice it. The noticing is the appamada, the heedfulness, the gentle attending that is the beginning of all the other work. The monkey in the forest is resting, the chariot has slowed, the creeper is there, as it always is, but for now the attention is here. With the breath, with the weight of the body, with the slow, unhurried company of these verses that have been travelling for 2,000 years to reach this room. The maluva vine, the tree that sprouts again from the uncut root, the charioteer's hands on the reins, the fourfold reversal. Anger met with non-anger, evil met with good, the miser met with giving, the liar met with truth, the Gandhari monks with their birch bark scrolls walking. All of it is here in the dark with you. All of it quietly company. There is more ahead, the verses on the fool and the wise, the one useful word, the song of victory, said to be the first words spoken after awakening, a song addressed not to a person, but to a house builder who turns out to be craving itself and the rafters broken at last. But that is for what comes next. For now, rest here. The breath, the stillness, the text unrolled in the dark, waiting gently. We continue when you are ready. There is a verse in the Tanhavagga that asks nothing of you. It does not promise you a method or a system or a 7-step path. It simply says, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, cross to the farther shore of existence. That is verse 348. Let it sit with you for a moment before we move on from it, because it is an unusual kind of instruction. Most instructions tell you what to pick up. This one tells you only what to set down. The past is easy to name. We all carry it. The replayed conversation. The decision that still turns itself over in the mind years later. The thing that was done or said or left unsaid. The past lives in the body as a kind of residue, a tightening that returns without announcement, a warmth that surfaces and then fades, the sudden appearance of a voice or a face from many years ago. The past does not need to be summoned, it arrives on its own. The future is also easy to name. Perhaps you have been meeting it tonight in the space between waking and sleep. The planning, the rehearsing, the low hum of all the things that still need doing, the conversations that have not yet happened, but that the mind is already scripting in careful detail. The future is a very energetic place. The mind goes there willingly and often. The present is a little harder. We say we want it. We are told to live in it. But the present, the actual texture of right now, has a strange quality. It vanishes the moment you try to name it. By the time you say this moment, it is already the next one, and yet the verse names the present alongside the past and future in the same breath as another thing to set down, which suggests that the clinging the verse is pointing to is not a matter of time at all, but of grip. The way the mind holds things, the way it wraps itself around experiences and declares them fixed and real and non-negotiable, to cross to the farther shore. That phrase comes from the oldest imagery in these teachings. The near shore is where we stand, caught, held, restless, craving. The farther shore is the open side, the unbound, what the text elsewhere calls nibbana, the deathless. And the crossing is not a dramatic leap. It is not an achievement. It is, in a sense, simply the releasing of what was never truly ours to begin with. Verse 348 is the last major verse we draw from the Tanhavagga tonight, and I want to simply let it rest here, unhurried, before we move on, because the Dhammapada does not demand that you solve it. It offers itself like a lamp placed at the edge of a long road. You do not have to carry the lamp. You only have to notice that the road is lit. Let go of the past. Let go of the future. Let go of the present. Cross over, take a slow breath, and when you are ready, we will come now to two of the text's most beloved chapters, the 5th and 6th Vaggas, Balavagga, the chapter on the fool, and Panditavagga, the chapter on the wise. They are placed in sequence as a pair, and this placement is itself part of the teaching. You cannot understand the wise without understanding the fool. And the fool, the text makes clear, is not a figure of contempt. The fool is simply a person who has not yet seen clearly, which is, in one way or another, all of us at various times and in various rooms. Verse 60 of the Balavagga opens with an image that will feel familiar tonight of all nights. Long is the night to one who is awake. Long is a league to one who is weary. Long is samsara, the wandering, the round of existence, the turning from life, to the foolish who do not know the true Dhamma. Long is the night to one who is awake. There is something the text is doing here that is precise and kind. It is not mocking the person who lies awake. It is simply naming the experience. Long is the night. Yes, this is exactly true. When sleep does not come easily, when the mind is restless and the hours seem to stretch, the night becomes a different kind of thing altogether. What would pass in 3 breaths when the eyes are closed becomes, in wakefulness, a slow and careful walk across difficult ground. The fool in this verse is not a fool because they are awake at night. The fool is someone who does not know the Dhamma, the teaching, the way things are. And the consequence of that not knowing is length, difficulty, the feeling that everything takes longer than it should, that the distance from here to rest is very, very far. The word samsara appears here, and it is worth pausing on. In Pali, samsara means literally the wandering on, the flow, the continuation. In Buddhist teaching, it refers to the cycle of existence, the turning from one life to the next, driven by craving and ignorance. But it also describes something you may recognize in a single night, the way the mind wanders, the way it circles back, the way you can seem to travel a great distance between one thought and the next, covering ground you did not intend to cover, visiting places you did not choose to visit. Long is samsara to the foolish who do not know the true Dhamma. Long is the wandering, long is the circling back. This verse is not a criticism, it is a diagnosis, and a diagnosis offered gently is itself a form of kindness, because once the circling is named, once the wandering is recognized as wandering, there is already a small stillness beginning at the edges. Let us move to verse 63 and to the turn this chapter takes, the place where the Balavagga offers something unexpected. A fool who knows his foolishness is wise, at least to that extent, but a fool who thinks himself wise, or that one is called a fool indeed. This verse does something remarkable. It draws a line not between the wise and the foolish, but between the foolish who know it and the foolish who do not. And it places the knowing fool surprisingly close to the wise at least to that extent. The knowing is the beginning. There is a quality of self-awareness in this verse that is very different from self-criticism. The person who lies awake and thinks, I am restless, I am scattered, I do not know what I am doing, that person is, in the Dhammapada's accounting, wiser than the person who is equally restless and scattered, but is certain they have it all worked out. The admission of not knowing is a door. The certainty of knowing, when the knowing is false, is a wall. I find this one of the most quietly compassionate verses in the entire chapter, because it meets the person in the middle of their confusion and says, the confusion you can see is not a failure. Seeing it is already the beginning of something else. We do not need to be wise tonight, we only need to know our foolishness, and even that knowing is enough. Rest pause here, just a breath. There is the body, heavy and warm, settling deeper into the dark. And when we continue, we arrive at one of the most precise and beautiful images in all of the Dhammapada. Perhaps in all of Buddhist literature, an image so simple and so exact that once you have heard it, it is very difficult to forget, verses 64 and 65. And they arrive, as so many of the Dhammapada's best verses do, as a pair. Though a fool may associate with a wise person all his life, he understands the Dhamma no more than a spoon tastes the flavor of the soup. But an intelligent person who associates with a wise one, even for a brief moment, he quickly understands the Dhamma as the tongue tastes the flavor of the soup. The spoon and the tongue. I want to stay with this image for a little while because it deserves more than a passing glance. A spoon passes through the soup many times. It enters the broth, it lifts it, it carries it. It has, in some sense, been inside the soup more than the tongue ever will be, and yet the spoon knows nothing of the flavor. The spoon cannot distinguish the warmth of ginger from the sweetness of onion, the salt, the depth, the slow complexity that came from hours of simmering. None of it reaches the spoon. The spoon is present, the spoon is involved, the spoon is doing the work, and the spoon is entirely without knowledge of what it is transporting. The tongue, by contrast, needs only a moment. One small taste and the entire experience of the soup is present. The warmth, the salt, the layered depth, all of it immediate and real and known, not accumulated through long exposure, not earned through repeated contact, just known in an instant through the right kind of attention. This is what the verse is offering us when it talks about wisdom. Not that association with a wise person is useless. The spoon is still needed. But that the mode of receiving matters more than the duration of exposure. You can sit in the presence of wisdom for a lifetime and remain a spoon if the contact never reaches the place in you that can actually taste. And you can hear one sentence, one verse, one moment of genuine meeting and understand immediately and completely. I do not know if there has been a moment tonight in which something landed for you in that way. One line from one verse, one image, the fletcher, the charioteer, the monkey in the forest, the creeper winding upward, something, maybe nothing. Both are fine. The Dhammapada is not asking you to remember everything. It is only offering you the soup. There is also something in this image about tonight, about these particular hours of darkness, because the mind that is still, the mind that has slowed and is no longer rushing from thought to thought, that mind is closer to the tongue than the spoon. Wakefulness in its fullest sense, the urgent, striving mental wakefulness, is very often the spoon. Busy, moving, present, and yet not tasting. The quiet mind, the mind that has begun to let go. The mind is more likely to taste. So if the night has been slow and soft, if the words have been landing in a different way than they would have at noon, that is not an accident. That is the tongue beginning to taste. Verse 76 now from the Tanhavagga, the chapter on the wise. And this one will surprise you. Should one find a wise person who points out faults and reproves, let one follow such a sage as one would a guide to hidden treasure. Follow the fault finder. This verse goes against a strong modern instinct. We tend to seek teachers who confirm us, who tell us we are doing well, who see our gifts and name them, and that kind of seeing is genuinely valuable. But the Dhammapada's Tanhavagga is more rigorous than that. It says, find the person who points out your faults and follow them. Not just tolerate them, not just endure them. Follow them the way you would follow a guide who knows where the treasure is buried, the hidden treasure. This is precise language. The treasure is not somewhere easy, somewhere obvious. It is hidden. And the person who points out your faults knows where it is. Because what is in the way of the treasure, the real obstacle, is not outside you, it is in you. It is the same thing the whole Dhammapada has been circling since verse 1. The untrained mind, the unexamined habit, the craving, the anger, the foolishness we mistake for wisdom. These are what lie between the person you are right now and the ground the text is pointing toward. And the person who can see those obstacles clearly and will say so, that person is not your critic. That person is your guide. This does not mean we should seek out unkindness. The verse is not an invitation to welcome cruelty dressed up as feedback, but it is a recognition that genuine correction given with care and received with openness is a form of love. That the teacher who tells you the difficult thing is often closer to your actual welfare than the teacher who tells you only what is comfortable. There is something gentle in this verse too, if you sit with it long enough, because it implies that you have faults, that there are places where the seeing is not clear, and it treats this as completely ordinary, completely workable. It does not say one who is free of faults. It says one who finds a guide who can point the faults out. The starting point is imperfection. The path is simply finding the right kind of company for the journey. And now verse 50 from earlier in the text, but held here because it belongs beside what we have just heard. Let none find fault with others. Let none see the omissions and commissions of others, but let one see one's own acts, done and undone. The Dhammapada holds these two verses together in a way that might seem like a contradiction, but is actually a very careful and coherent map. In verse 76 it says, accept the guide who points out your faults. In verse 50 it says, do not spend your energy pointing out the faults of others. These are not in tension. They are describing two different positions, two different directions of attention. One is the attention of the learner, who welcomes being seen even in difficulty. The other is the attention that belongs only inward, the one that serves your own clarity without becoming a habit of judgment directed outward, one's own acts, done and undone. There is something in that phrase, done and undone, that carries a particular weight in the quiet of a night like this. Because it is not only what you did that the verse names, it is also what you did not do, the word left unspoken, the kindness that you noticed the opportunity for and then let pass, the act of courage or patience or generosity that might have been and was not. These two are part of the seeing, not as a summons to guilt. The Dhammapada does not deal in guilt, but as part of the honest inventory that the wise person keeps about their own life. The gentle, ongoing noticing of what the life actually contains. This is not easy work, but the text is patient with us. It has been patient with everyone who has ever held it. Let us rest for a moment before we continue. Take a breath, feel the weight of the body in this particular place. The night is quiet. The verses have been traveling through the room like slow, careful light. And there is more still to come, just ahead. A cluster of lines so simple and so quietly powerful that they have been quietly dissolving and rebuilding lives for 2,000 years. We are coming now to verses 100, 101 and 102. They arrive in sequence, a small triptych, and like so much of the Dhammapada, they make their point by contrast, by showing you two things side by side and trusting you to feel the difference. Better than 1,000 useless words is one useful word, hearing which one attains peace. Better than 1,000 useless verses is one useful verse, hearing which one attains peace. And better than reciting 100 meaningless stanzas is the reciting of one Dhamma verse, hearing which one attains peace. One useful word, one useful verse, one verse of Dhamma. There is something about the number 1,000, so large, so emphatic, placed against the number 1 that is precise and almost playful. 1,000 words is a great many words. You can fill a room with 1,000 words. You can fill an evening with 1,000 words. You can build elaborate structures of language, long passages of sound and meaning and complexity, and if none of it lands, if none of it helps the mind come to rest, or see clearly, or let go of what it has been gripping too tightly, then the sum of it is useless. And a single word, one word, the right word in the right moment, received with the kind of openness that allows it to actually arrive. That word can do what 1,000 others could not. This is a verse that turns itself inside out if you look at it long enough, because you might ask, how do I find the useful word? How do I know in advance which of the 1,000 is the one? And the answer the text seems to offer is that you cannot always know in advance. But you can make yourself the kind of person who can receive it. The tongue, not the spoon. The quiet mind, not the mind rushing toward the next thing. The person sitting still in the dark, listening, not grading or evaluating or deciding whether the words are useful enough, just listening. And tonight, in this particular arrangement of hours and darkness and breath, you are already that person. Whatever has or has not landed, whatever you will or will not remember in the morning, the listening itself is the practice the verse is describing. You do not have to do anything more than this. You are already doing it. There is one more territory to enter before we close tonight's chapter. One more sweep of this very old map, and it concerns the history of the text itself, how it traveled, how it arrived, who has carried it through time, and who carries it still. The Dhammapada, as we have traveled through it tonight, exists in the Pali language. Pali is the language of the Theravada Buddhist canon, an ancient Middle Indo-Aryan tongue that is no longer anyone's mother tongue, but has been maintained, learned, and recited by generations of monks across Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. The text sits within what is called the Pali Canon, in Sanskrit, the Tipitaka, meaning the three baskets, a vast collection of teachings. Within it, the Sutta Pitaka, the basket of discourses, within that the Khuddaka Nikaya, the collection of minor texts. And minor there means minor in size, not in importance. The Dhammapada, at 423 verses in 26 vaggas, is one of the shortest texts in the canon, and possibly the most read. The verses were not all given on one occasion. This is worth knowing. The Dhammapada is a curated anthology, sayings attributed to the Buddha that were gathered from across many different discourses, many different moments and settings, and arranged thematically into these 26 chapters. It is a distillation, a gathering of what was clearest and most essential, organized so that the themes could teach by their placement, by their sequence, by the way one verse casts light on the next. Around the 5th century of the Common Era, a scholar monk named Buddhaghosa compiled what is called the Dhammapada Atthakatha, the commentary on the Dhammapada. This is a remarkable text in its own right. For each verse, Buddhaghosa supplied a narrative, who the Buddha was supposedly speaking to, in what circumstances, what had happened to prompt the teaching. The story of the fletcher who could not straighten arrows until he learned to still himself, the monk who kept returning to the village, the young woman watching the river. These are tradition. They are the living imaginative tissue that communities of practice built around each verse over centuries to make the teachings speakable, memorable, human. They are not records of events we can verify historically, but they are not false either. They are what a living tradition does. It grows a story around a seed because stories are how human beings carry what matters. We receive them as tradition, and that is exactly what they are, something loved and carried forward. In the 19th century, a scholar named Max Müller brought the Dhammapada into English for the first time in a form that the Western world could encounter. This was in 1881 as part of a series called the Sacred Books of the East, a vast translation project that was one of the first sustained attempts to make Asian scriptures available to Western readers. Müller's translation opened a door. It was not perfect. No translation of this text is perfect, or could be, because the Pali words carry meanings that English does not easily map onto, but it was a beginning. And from that beginning came the long line of translators who followed him. Acharya Buddharakkhita, whose translation is still widely used in Theravada study circles, with an introduction by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Thanisaro Bhikkhu, whose careful, somewhat austere renderings hold closely to the Pali. Gil Fronsdal, whose translation is prized for its accessibility. Eknath Eswaran, whose version brought the text to many who had never encountered Buddhism at all. Each translation is a reading. Each one is a person sitting with the Pali, turning it over in their mind, trying to find the English word that carries the meaning without distorting it, and each one finds slightly different words because the text is deep enough that different approaches into it yield different illuminations. This is not a failure of translation, it is a sign of depth. And the text has been traveling far longer and wider than its English translations suggest. Among the oldest known Buddhist manuscripts in existence are a set of birchbark scrolls discovered in the region of ancient Gandhara, what is now the border area between modern Pakistan and Afghanistan. These scrolls, written in a language called Gandhari, in a script called Kharoshthi, contain a version of the Dhammapada, a recension scholars call the Gandhari Dhammapada. They are dated to roughly the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era, making them among the earliest surviving Buddhist texts of any kind. There is also the Patna Dhammapada in a Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit, and the Tanhavagga, a Sanskrit collection that overlaps significantly with the Pali text. These parallel recensions, different languages, different scripts, different regions, tell us that these verses were moving very early and very widely, that the community that preserved them was not small or local, but widespread, deeply rooted, genuinely committed to carrying what they had received. For centuries, in monasteries across Theravada Asia, the Dhammapada has been a memorization text. Young monks have learned it by heart. The verse form, the meter, the rhythm, the compression, makes it unusually suited to memory. A verse you can say in one breath, carrying an image as precise as a spoon in soup or a fletcher with an arrow, is a verse that lodges itself and stays. And so these 423 gathas have been spoken aloud in morning chanting, in evening reflection, in the daily rhythms of monastic life for more than 2 millennia. They are not museum pieces, they are living words in living mouths. There is one final cluster of verses we carry tonight, and it is perhaps the most remarkable thing in the text, verses 153 and 154. These 2 verses are traditionally held to be the first words the Buddha spoke after his awakening, after the long night under the Bodhi tree, after the moment of whatever that moment was in which the chains fell away and seeing was complete. This is the traditional account. We receive it as tradition, as the community's way of marking the most significant moment in the story. And whether or not these were literally the first syllables spoken in the grey light before dawn, they have been understood for centuries as the cry of someone who has seen through to the root of things, a song of recognition. And strangely, beautifully, it is addressed to the house builder. O house builder, you are seen. You will not build this house again. All your rafters are broken, your ridgepole shattered. My mind has reached the unconditioned. The end of craving has been attained. The house builder is not a person. The house builder is craving. Tanha, the force that through the long turning of existence has been gathering materials and assembling shelters, building and building the structures that bind us. And the house is existence itself in its conditioned form, the shape that suffering takes when craving keeps laying rafters and raising ridgepoles and insisting on another room. You are seen. That phrase has the quality of something that shifts everything. Because what craving depends on, what keeps it working undisturbed, is a kind of invisibility. The maluva creeper winds upward while the householder is asleep. The roots go deeper in the dark. The building continues when attention is elsewhere. But when it is seen, when the mechanism is recognized in full without flinching, the rafters fall. Not through effort, not through a new technique, but through clear seeing. The seeing is itself the dismantling. All your rafters are broken. In the architectural imagery of these verses, the rafters are what hold the roof in place. They are the supports, the structures that give the conditioned existence its shape. and when they break, the roof comes down. Not catastrophically, not with fire or collapse, but as relief, as the opening of something that was closed. Your ridgepole shattered. The ridgepole is the single beam that runs along the peak of the roof, the thing everything else leans against. In traditional architecture, it is the last thing placed and the thing without which no roof is possible. To shatter the ridgepole is to dismantle the very peak of the structure. There is nothing for the rafters to lean against. The house, built by craving through life after life, cannot be assembled again. My mind has reached the unconditioned. Unconditioned, this is one of the names the text uses for nibbana. What is unconditioned is not assembled from parts. It is not put together, and therefore it does not fall apart. It does not depend on anything else for its existence. It simply is, the way space simply is, not made and therefore not unmade. The end of craving has been attained. Not the suppression of craving, not the control of craving. The end, the root that the tree cannot re-sprout from, because it has been seen through completely. I want to stay with these verses for a moment longer, not to analyze them, not to explain what awakening is or what it means or whether it is possible. These are questions the text does not ask you to answer tonight, but simply to let the image settle. The house builder seen at last, the rafters broken, the ridgepole shattered, the mind arriving somewhere that was always there, underneath all the building, waiting in the silence that the noise of construction had been covering. You do not have to understand this tonight. You do not have to believe it. You only have to hear it. And hearing it, perhaps, notice that there is something underneath your own restlessness tonight. Underneath the wandering mind, underneath the creeper and the chariot and the long night. Something quiet and unbuilt and already whole. The Dhammapada does not ask you to find it. It only asks you to sit near the possibility. Take a slow breath. The body is heavy, the room is dark. Whatever the night has carried, whatever the mind has been building or dismantling or reaching for, you are here. Still and warm and resting in the company of these very old words. Let us come now to the end of tonight's chapter. And in the gentle tradition of this walk, let us gather what we met. We met the fletcher, the wise person who straightens the flickering, fickle mind as a fletcher, straightens an arrow over a flame. Patient, skilled, returning again and again to the work of making something true. Verse 33 of the Cittavagga, the mind chapter. The mind that is hard to guard and hard to control, which the text does not pretend is otherwise, but which the text also says can be tamed. And a tamed mind brings happiness. Not because it becomes rigid or still or empty, but because it is no longer driving the cart off the road. We met the charioteer, verse 222 of the Kodhavagga, standing in a rolling chariot that wants to go where it wants to go, to the surge of anger that rises before we have decided whether to let it. And the one who can check it, who can feel the pull and still hold the reins, the one the Dhammapada calls the true charioteer. Not the one who merely holds the reins when the horse is still, but the one who holds them when everything is moving. We met the monkey in the forest, verse 334 of the Tanhavagga, leaping from branch to branch, always reaching, always a little ahead of itself, always certain that the next fruit will be the satisfying one. And the creeper that grows alongside it, winding upward in the dark, the clinging vine of wanting that grows like grass after rain, that re-sprouts from the uncut root, however many times it is cut down, the tree and its root. The deep below the obvious, the reason why what we address on the surface returns, we met the spoon and the tongue. verse 64 and 65 from the Balavagga. The spoon that passes through the soup 1,000 times and tastes nothing. The tongue that needs only a single moment of real contact to know everything. The difference between presence that touches and presence that does not. Between knowledge accumulated through exposure and understanding that arrives through openness. We met the house builder. The builder who built the house of conditioned existence rafter by rafter through the long wandering of samsara, and who, at last, was seen. Verses 153 and 154, the rafters broken, the ridgepole shattered, the mind arriving at the unconditioned. A song that tradition says was sung in the grey light after the long night under the tree when the building was over. All of these images came to us tonight through the Dhammapada, through the Pali Canon, the Khuddaka Nikaya, the 423 verses in 26 Vaggas that have been read and recited and memorized and sung in the early mornings of monasteries from Sri Lanka to Myanmar to Thailand for more than 2,000 years. Through the monks with their birch bark scrolls in ancient Gandhara, through Buddhaghosa in the 5th century, assembling the stories that surround the verses like warmth around a fire, through Max Muller in 1881 opening a door, through all the translators who followed him, each finding different words for the same deep water. And tonight they arrived here, in this room, in the dark, in these particular hours. You do not need to remember any of this. If one image stayed with you, the fletcher, the charioteer, the spoon, and the soup, let that be enough. If nothing stayed, that is also enough. The listening was real. The quiet was real. The long, unhurried company of these verses was real. And something in you was present for all of it, even in the parts where the mind drifted, even in the passages where sleep began to edge in at the corners. That something, the part that was present, the awareness that was here, underneath the restlessness, underneath the wandering, underneath the reaching and releasing, that is what the text calls citta. The heart-mind, the thing that can be trained and guarded and directed, the thing that is not broken, no matter how long the night has been. Mind precedes all things, says the very first verse. And a rightly directed mind, says verse 43, does more good than mother or father or any kin. Your mind has been with these words tonight. Wherever it wandered, it came back. Even in sleep, it will be digesting something slowly, without effort, the way the body digests warmth. You do not have to hold anything tightly. The text does not ask to be gripped. It asks only to be heard, and you heard it. And the night is full and still. Whatever was restless has grown a little quieter. Whatever was reaching has begun, perhaps, to rest its hands. The chariot has slowed. The monkey is still. The creeper is there, as it always is, but for now, the attention is not tangled in it. The attention is here with the weight of the body, with the breath, with the dark. This is enough. More than enough. Exactly as much as was needed. Sleep well. Subject closed for the night. Let it all relax away.